And joining me now is Justis Gibbs. He's state legislature down in Mississippi, born and raised, a lifelong resident of Jackson, Mississippi, and part of our continuing series to elevate new voices. And Justis Gibbs joins me now. Justis, nice to meet you.
Great to be here, man. Great to be here, and so glad that you're allowing Mississippi to let its voice be heard.
Well, a good look. One of my favorite bosses ever is a man named Andy Lack, and he's been the guy who helped with Mississippi Today. I think he lives in Jackson these days, so you may have see him or come across him every now and then. And he has an interesting story of what got his ancestors to Mississippi. It's an unusual one. Jewish immigrants who end up making clothes for the Confederacy. They didn't know any. They were just immigrants, and it was a job. They had no idea. You know, it was one of those things. And it's something, the more he learned about that, it just made him want to invest more and spend more time there. So, but Justis, give me your origin story. Give us how did you get into politics? Why, what was the motivation? What was everybody always says one reason, like, I'm getting in, I want to solve this problem. I want to do this. What was that for you?
Yeah, it was kind of multifaceted for me. I'd first say that I grew up in a family of public servants. My father was a circuit judge when I was born. My mother served in the legislature for about 6 years prior to running for circuit judge herself. So, a lot of the kitchen table conversations that we had always sort of, revolved around politics or policy or what was going on in our city and our state and in our country. Growing up, going to Murrah High School, serving in the student council is something that was just a real natural knack for me. But when I came home after graduating from Howard University, attending law school, I noticed something very interesting, which was, this sort of criticism that is directed to young people about, not exercising the right to vote, not, helping either political party, with their margins. And what I really recognize is that there is just such an empty void with young leadership on all levels, city, county, state. And I wanted to be a part of changing that. So at age 27, I decided to run for an open seat in my area. And that's really how I got involved.
It's interesting. I feel like there's quite a few people in your generation in Mississippi who've decided to, quote, not wait their turn. Right. Yeah. And try to go challenge the establishment a little bit, particularly on the Democratic side, because I think there's been what have you guys been doing? Right. We're still in the same place, haven't made the progress that I think people think should be made. There was a new mayor of Jackson not that long ago. And so sort of the same mindset. So I do feel as if whether we call you older Gen Z or younger millennial, where do you feel like you fall in that?
I'm a younger millennial, but there's also a great bucket of young Gen Z folks who are interested in politics in Mississippi as well. It's just that we need to find space for them to serve in elected office. I think that there is a umpteen amount of leadership development courses and leadership cohorts. It's so many that you can't even name them. But, once they are prepared, we shouldn't send them to the next cohort. We should send them to elected office. We should put them in a position of making these decisions that are going to be solidified when we are raising our families. And I agree with you. I think that it is, we can't treat our elected officers as property. I think that it's okay sometimes to pass the baton or to say that, your expertise can be used outside of the elected spectrum. So,
it's been interesting, particularly with one of these generational arguments have actually been sometimes sharpest among African-American communities, where you've had somebody who was a longtime hero maybe stay in office a little bit too long because, they broke the barrier, right? They got there. And there is, so I weirdly understand the sense of entitlement. Hey, I broke down this barrier. I made this happen. The reason this is possible is because of what I did. What do you say to that older generation that feels as if, hey, wait a minute, I did all this hard work. I took literal beatings in order to break through these barriers. But some of them aren't ready to pass the baton. What do you say to that?
Well, the first part of your inquiry was the word I. I did this, I did that, I took the beating. So, if I did this, then I'm entitled to this, when it's never really supposed to be about the I. It's supposed to be about the community. It's supposed to be about the progress.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's about the I, well, I also did that. I mean, as a young person at age 27, Chuck, I remember knocking on doors and people thought I was selling cookies, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, here's my push card. I'm running for elected office, just
Mm-hmm.
because the mindset of my community, and it's not to criticize them, but it's just what you have known about who should serve an elected office, what they are supposed to look like, what are the taglines, the 20 years of experience, the 30 years of experience, without the question being, what have you done within that 20 or that 30 years? So when a young person comes to your door, you don't expect them to run for elected office. So my
Mm-hmm.
point is, I could also have that entitled attitude of saying,
Mm.
I broke down a barrier because I'm the youngest Democrat state elected official in Mississippi, but instead, I'm also focused on that next generation. How do we find space for them to serve? But if we start to look at it as a holistic mission of changing this state, without it being, I've been here for so long, and you should, pay homage to me. There's many ways that we can pay homage,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just, continuing to support the person, in elected
Right.
office. Now, there are also some that are doing great stuff, but I think that we have to create that space.
So Mississippi is one of these states where it looks like a deep red state. But when you look at the potential of what it is, when you look at what I would say the unregistered population or the unengaged population, this should be a 50-50 state. This should be a state, to put it in where that should have African American senators, plural. This should be a state that has is a bastion of political power for African Americans, and it hasn't been. What do you see today? What have been some of the mistakes of the past that you hope to fix, just tactically? I mean, look, this is bigger than just tactics, but I just look at the last 30 years and think just better tactics would make this state more competitive politically, but I think those that feel underserved would feel as if they had some political power.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you, I remember the 2019 gubernatorial race with Jim Hood and Tate Reeves, a race that was decided by 45,000 votes. And then 4 years later, we have a race for governor between Brandon Presley and Tate Reeves that was decided, I think, between 24,000 votes. That's a 2 to 3 point race. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the country and the folks who are in leadership positions countrywide are understanding that Mississippi can be the epicenter of changing the American South, of actually becoming not only a purple state, but a blue state one day. I mean, we are seeing it statistically based going in the right direction, because we are investing in candidates who are meeting people where they are, explaining to people in rural areas who have to drive 5-10 miles and even further just to go to an emergency room or hospital. Right. Why the policies that they've been voting on are obtuse to their way of life, the quality of their way of life. I think that what we have to start doing is we really need to ring the alarm on our national, the donor base of national politics. I mean, all of the money that we pour into these national races, and there seems to not be an eye on states like Mississippi, because it's on the ground, man. We are a resilient party. It's the fact that we don't have the tools and the resources that we need to do what it is that we need to do.
And a little bit of money. If we want to put this in terms of ROI, I think the return on investment, if you have $5 million to spend, it's going to get lost in Georgia, $5 million. No offense to Georgia. It just is what it is. A very expensive state now. $5 million in voter registration efforts in Mississippi in an off year, that could lead to 3 to 5 new Democrats in the state legislature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also just on the judicial front, I mean, we just had a redistricting case that was decided by a federal court to redraw our maps because of extreme gerrymandering, which, of course, found to violate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So I think we brush the surface and we say, well, Mississippi has a supermajority Republican controlled legislature. They have a Republican governor. All statewide offices are Republican. Well, we're not, getting deeper down into understanding the reasons as to why it looks like that.
Right.
When the citizens themselves, the constituency, a lot of people have struggled with whether I go with the groupthink and go with the majority of who looks like me and the culture in which
Right.
I've grown up, or do I go with what makes realistic sense for my children, for my grandchildren? I think we really can be the epicenter of that change.
Let's just put it in a little starker race terms. Is the bigger problem unengaged African American voters or moderate white voters who aren't ready to leave the Republican Party? Like, if you were to say in the statewide race, what should be the priority? Is it registering the less engaged and getting more engagement in just because the numbers are there? Or is it better persuasion campaign for that? Because right now, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think Brandon Presley got 19-20% of the white vote. Does that sound right? And I think I think the numbers have got to be closer to high 20s, somewhere between 28 and 32 to win. So what do you see? And I obviously maybe the answer is a little bit of both, but if you were to put more effort into one or the other, where would you put it?
Yeah, and you're right. It is both. I know that that's a basic answer, but you really have to do both at the same exact time. I'd say that Presley has been focusing on his rural coalition, which is very important for the Democratic Party to invest in. And that's going into the rural areas. When you look at the maps on the presidential election night, and they're adding up all of the counties, and it's just 100 votes here, a couple hundred votes here, but in the grand scheme of things, that is how you're able to beat an epicenter of like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Detroit, Michigan. So I think that what we should do is make sure that there are folks in the party that feel included and feel inclusive to be able to do what is their strong set, which may be, breaking it down to the rural voters, but also doing the work of making sure that we find ways of getting unengaged African Americans out to vote at every election. I noticed in my community when I was running for office, there are folks that are blue collar, white collar folks who don't vote. They don't vote. They're in the process. They just, what are you going to do that's different? And that's why I decided to try to focus my first 2 years in the legislature on actually bringing about visual change, visual reality for people to say, oh, that's why it's so important to elect people in this specific office.
Give me an example of that. What is that? What is something when you say visual change? Like, I think like a mayor, I would think like making sure every street light has a working light bulb, right? Like that would be a visual change. What's something, because it's a little harder from a state leg seat when you're in the political minority. Yeah.
Very hard. And so with Ways and Means and Appropriations, of course, we do have an ability of sending state dollars to our communities for various projects. And that goes back to the discriminatory nature of our legislature and the way in which it was crafted in 1819, meaning that Democratic majority districts or African American majority districts don't usually receive their just due in state of appropriations. But I've been able to start the first state-sponsored solar surveillance camera program that is giving a lot of my residents the ability to feel more comfortable and safe in their communities. It's attached to the county sheriff's office and the real-time command crime center. I've been able to repave streets, repave roads, because we know that City of Jackson has had to, of course, invest in a lot of other, issues that we have had. But if we can get all of our elected officials to work together to try to help the city in whatever capacity it is, we're improving the quality of life of residents. And that is also how you get people to show back up to the polls. If they can point to something in their community and say, well, you know what? He said he was going to work on this and he did it. Then this is why state representative matters.
Right. Let's talk about Jackson. I used to say when I was sitting doing Meet the Press now, I spent a lot of time on the Jackson water crisis. I thought this should be more of a national story. I think when one of America's 50 state capitals does not have reliable drinking water, This should be the focus of somebody in federal government, the singular focus. And I found, and it hasn't mattered whether it was Republican administration or Democratic administration, you get the lip service, but there doesn't seem to be this, what are we doing? Just figure out how to fix this problem. Stop trying to figure out whose fault it is. And I felt as if there was a lot of effort being put in. Well, a bad contract that the mayor did, or a bad thing that the governor, and everybody was pointing fingers and nobody was getting their clean drinking water. Give me an update on the situation and how much of this is just caught up in just old fashioned political, finger pointing.
Yeah. Well, we're of course under a federal receivership now. We have a gentleman named Ted Hennepin who has been brought to the city of Jackson to try to revitalize the city's water system. There have been, of course, those who've been satisfied. There have been a lot of businesses in Jackson that's threatened to leave because of the situation, that are back on their feet with consistent, reliable drinking water, and water that's just being, sent to their businesses on a consistent basis. But, we also still have our struggles. We still have our struggles with the federal receivership, understanding the differences between the sections of the city and what some areas of the city of Jackson has struggled with versus what others have struggled with.
Who is it? Somebody with at least a knowledge of Jackson in charge of the receivership, or is it just some outsider?
Well, the judge, we're talking about the federal judge who does live and frequent in Jackson. So that does give us a leg up. Somebody does understand,
right,
the history of Jackson. And of course, it's really his authority that is given to Ted Hennepin in relation to how they actually revive the system. I will say that there have been improvements made. But again, you can't get caught up in, I think you talked about how people are caught up in where to point the finger and who to place blame on. But we also can't also figure out who to blame in terms of where the contracts go. We kind of get into this conundrum sometimes when we do have power. The power now goes to, well, who else do you give power to? Right? Like, where do I money? And I didn't want you to send the money to that company. It should have went to this company. Right. And now we're losing sight on what it is that we're supposed to be improving.
The main thing should be the main thing, which is clean drinking water. That's the main thing. Let's not take our eye off of it.
That's right. Yeah. And some people want that, Chuck. They just want effectiveness. They don't care how you do it. Just don't break the law. Do it the correct way and get it as consistent and reliable as possible.
What do you attribute it to? You've lived in Jackson your whole life. And so it may mean, has this been sort of the norm? You've understood, this is how it works sometimes. What you talk about growing up with politics around the table. How did something like this happen? And why is the state leadership so laissez-faire about it?
Yeah. Again, I can't say that there's one person that you place blame to. But I think that there's been a variety of factors. I think that you can blame it partly on flight, people leaving Jackson, our tax base decreasing, but I also think that you can blame it on previous administrations and their lack of sounding the alarm at the appropriate time. But I also think that you can blame it on the state's leadership and the state not coming in and giving the city adequate resources of what it actually needs. But that also goes to the breakdown between Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. So growing up at the table, the stories that my parents would tell me and my sister was in relation to how Democrats and Republicans work together a lot of the times.
And back in the 80s and 90s, they did, because Mississippi did, by the way, regularly it was all Democrats until somewhere in the 90s that Republicans broke through. So it wasn't an unusual, late 80s in the Senate and then in governor's races. So you had this, I think, because both parties had a shot at winning the governorship, the relationship to Jackson was better for both parties. Right?
Yeah. But I will say that I have seen the state leadership, because of the culture and political culture of the city of Jackson within the past 8 years, say, I'm going to halt any type of assistance to the city. And we are now getting away from that. We have new leadership. We have a much more inclusive city government that sees all areas of Jackson as being important and included in the future of Jackson. And also, we have new leadership in the legislature, which has started things like the Capital Revitalization Committee, focused on creating legislation and policy to help the capital city. You cannot have a successful state without a successful capital city.
100%.
And Jackson is going to be a democratic city. So, it's almost like get out of your, put your big pants on and just understand that, yes, you are going to have to work with Democratic leadership in the city of Jackson. It's going to help the state.
This is a virus that's going through our political system, which is you're seeing it a lot more on the right, which is we're only going to govern for our supporters. And if you didn't vote for me, you're not going to get in. You're like, no. It just means we've let you make the decisions, but there's a baseline assumption that you're going to keep services where they're at or improve them, not decrease services because they didn't give you political support. I mean, I got the sense that Republicans in state government felt like there was no political price to pay to punish Jackson. Yeah. And I think 20 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah. I agree with you. And not listening to the people on the ground, the people who've lived in Jackson for decades. Those are the folks who you go to, in order to understand the dynamics of the city or what it is that the city needs. What are they asking for? I can tell you the countless amount of years that the city of Jackson has asked for appropriations from our state government, and it's fallen on deaf ears. Now, I think that there's blame that you can place on both parties, but at the end of the day, there are people behind these offices, these elected offices. There are folks who are struggling. And so that's what I'm saying. The finger pointing at some point has to stop because there are people who need the support from their government. We're not exempt from paying state taxes because we're a democratic city. So that's, again, why it's important for appropriations to be spread equitably around the state of Mississippi, not just in areas where you can go and tout, being a proud conservative Republican or where you can say that you're a strong Democrat.
Would you say Mississippi is culturally conservative across the board, meaning the average Democratic district is just culturally more conservative than the average Democratic district, say, in the Northeast, or are we missing something here? How would you describe the Democratic Party in Mississippi? Is it more conservative than the National Party?
I would say socially conservative. Potentially, yes. But again, you still have.
And what does that mean? Is that just on abortion issues, or is that on other sort of cultural issues like same-sex marriage and things like that?
I think all of that. I would say when it comes to abortion, I think a majority of us are pro-choice that are within the Mississippi Democratic Party. But I do think that there can be some disagreement. It may not be as loud as others. Disagreement in regards to gay marriage as well as other social issues. But again, what I think we have to continue to focus on doing is staying unified as the party. The super minority, attacking the super minority or ostracizing other folks in the super minority because you don't agree on one specific issue is not going to get you in the majority. It's not going to move you there, Right. And one thing that I've noticed, I can count all of the moderate Republicans, even in the state of Mississippi, Chuck, who told me and all of my colleagues, I will never support Donald Trump again after January 6th. So we'll never, we can't be loud about it, Justice, but we're not going to go and vote for him in the ballot box. Yeah. You see the previous election and the man has over 70 million votes. Right. Well, what that says to me is, there may be some folks who disagree, but when it comes to the end of the day, they're going to unify and align with their party, with the person who they believe are going to do more good than the bad that they see. Mm-hmm. I think that we need to start to adopt that more in the Democratic Party in Mississippi. There are going to be Democrats who are lifelong Democrats who may disagree on one or two issues.
Look, Brandon Presley on the issue of abortion, I think is in the minority of what you just said about the Democratic Party in Mississippi, right?
That is correct. Correct. But what you saw, Chuck, in that election is you saw us unify at the end. No, there was not large groups of Democrats protesting saying, how dare we support this guy who is putting his hand on the Bible and has spent millions of dollars on television ads saying that he is pro-life. No. We understood the gravity of the moment. Mm-hmm. The gravity of the moment is this current Republican state administration needs to go. And the person that we have that is our most powerful opponent to him is someone who we need to stand behind. Now, when it comes to governing, yeah, of course, we'll get into the needs and the weeds then, because now we have someone who's more responsive in the governor's office. Mm-hmm. So that's, again, what we have to focus on to get out of this super minority, to not ostracize each other, but to find ways of unifying to get to the main goal.
As an observer of national politics and of what how the Democrats are doing, I'm sure you see the same. You're seeing what we see, which is, how unpopular the party's brand is right now. What's your diagnosis for that, and what's your cure?
Yeah. Well, one, when it comes to young people, I think we need to listen to understand young people and not listen to respond. There needs to be, I think we can be a little bit more inclusive to the ideas that young people bring about and the ideas that Southern Democrats bring about to the national party and the national platform. But, again, I think that we do need a new generation of leadership in the party. And I think that we do need to be captivated as a party. I remember in 2008, the way that our community felt when we had a new leader, someone who kind of took the party by storm. Mm-hmm. And it got everybody excited and involved about wanting to vote again, wanting to be involved again. I think that we need that in the Democratic Party. A little caffeine in the system. I felt a lot of that electricity at the DNC when Vice President Kamala Harris was our nominee. But how do we keep that electricity going? And how do we rev up that electricity again in 2028? I think is what's most important. Listen, this is the party for working class people. This is not the party of billionaires. There are more working class people than billionaires in the United States. So when we start to surgically pick apart the platform, I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with what we stand for. I think it's, who do we see? Who are we showing in America that their voices matter, that they're a priority? Similar to what I said about Mississippi. Sometimes I don't feel like the national brand sees Mississippi or sees the Democrats in Mississippi.
No, they don't. Yeah.
The way that they should. And I will give credit to DNC Vice Chair Malcolm Kenyatta, because he traveled to Mississippi. And while I didn't get a chance to meet him, he did the work that should have been done decades ago here. And not only just seeing us, but giving us those resources, because we need money, we need funds, and we need to, these are 6 electoral votes down here, and they're votes that we can pick up one day if we get the right investment.
Well, you start looking at the census of 2030 and where, the blue wall of the Midwest won't be enough electoral votes. You're going to need another state. And then you're going to have to narrowly hope you win Georgia, North Carolina. Or do you need some padding? And when you start looking at the board, I look at Mississippi is, this is a lighter red state than its reputation. I always say my favorite way is, it ain't Idaho. Okay. Idaho is dark red, and that is what it is, right? Just like Massachusetts is dark blue. Okay. Those, that you're going to have that on both sides of the aisle. Mississippi ain't Idaho, but the National Party treats it like Idaho.
Yeah. And envision the freak out that will happen on the other side. When that state does turn purple, right, or it does.
You saw it in Georgia. I mean, look what it did to the state party, Republican Party are still divided over this. They're still fighting. They're like, can't believe they blew it, right? And they're still seeing it. They still don't quite think it was a one-off, or it was this, or it was that. But it did. It scrambled them. I mean, it's like if you really want to do game theory, it's a version of game theory. You rattle your opponent by suddenly taking a territory that they never thought they had to protect.
Right. And now kick another domino, right? Kick Mississippi and allow Mississippi to do the unthinkable, because what it will do. Go ahead.
No. You say it, because I think you're going to say it. I was just about to prompt you.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that where is their attention focused? The attention is now focused in the South. Wait a minute. This has been safe territory for as long as we've known it. And now you've taken the attention, the focus, the resources, the money off of the Wisconsins, off of the Michigans, off of the swing states.
This is exactly it. Iowa being in the center of the political debate for presidential races allowed the ethanol industry to essentially punch above its weight, and that benefited financially the state of Iowa. If Mississippi is in play, you suddenly will get real investment in the state, attention. National politicians will make promises that they have to keep.
That's right.
Right? When you're considered already in one column or the other, like the voters benefit being, I always say this, the most valuable voters in America are swing voters because politicians obsessively need you. Mm-hmm. And if you are seen as hard to get, not easy to get, it's amazing what the largesse that will come your state's way.
Absolutely. And I can feel it when, I served as a surrogate for Kamala Harris's campaign, and I went to North Carolina on the campus of the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And you could see it in the eyes as well as the conversations I had with young college voters. They knew how much their vote mattered. It was like, if you can convince me right now not being undecided, you've done a number. Your flight here was worth it. And I noticed when I came back home to Mississippi, the difference in how people saw their vote on the presidential level. A lot of Democrats, we're going to go and exercise our right, but we don't see it as, as so much of importance to the political candidates and their machines themselves. And I agree with you when you talked about investment. When we're talking about the things that come along with it, that we may not be paying attention to. We're paying attention to who wins or who loses, but there's so much more that comes with your state turning to purple, with it becoming a swing state. And like you said, folks have to make promises that they have to keep because they have to come back to you.
I got to land this plane because I always promise on these YouTubes to make it a hard 30. But I promise you'll be able to find Republicans in Mississippi at someday that you can lead the charge to say, hey, let's make Mississippi an early presidential primary state because both parties will benefit. This is one of those areas. Both parties have benefited in Iowa. Both parties benefit in New Hampshire. Both parties benefit in Nevada. Both parties benefit in South Carolina. A state like Mississippi that could use a little bit of just, it's like hosting a big event. You get to host a big event and you get all sorts of money pouring into your economy. If you're hosting the NCAA regionals in Jackson or something like that, it's no different, and then politicians might learn a thing or two about what's going on in Mississippi and they may change things.
That's right. And now we can have the NCAA in Mississippi because we've changed that divisive flag with a conservative emblem. Unfortunately, people only pay attention to money and opportunity to eliminate the divisive, culture that we've had in Mississippi for quite some time. So I think you bring out a really good point, Chuck. There's so much more to, put us in the right direction and to really have meaningful progress in Mississippi,
I just find that every time I get to know Mississippi leaders, I think there's so many good leaders. It's just more people in the state need to believe in their leaders because it does feel as if just a little bit of effort would allow Mississippi to punch higher on the list here.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And we have the power now. I mean, Hinds County, one of the most populous counties, could have won that gubernatorial seat. We had the votes. Just that county, just the county that I'm in right now, we could have won that. So that is the message to the donor class. That is the message to those that have the resources as of how quick we can change this state if we are able to be fully invested in.
Yeah, no, I'm convinced. It's I look at, sometimes I look at states in the electoral map the way I look at, rising college football powers. Mississippi could be a power here. They just need a little investment. Yeah. So
just a little bit.
All right, let me ask before I'll get you out of here on this. Ole Miss or Mississippi State?
University of Mississippi, man. I got my law degree there. My father got his law degree there. And I'm a big fan of Ole Miss football. I think we're going to do amazing things. We're going to just erase last year. We're not going to talk about it. And we're going to do some amazing things this year.
I will say this: Lane Kiffin is a press conference I always want to pay attention to because you never know what he's going to say.
That's right. That's right. And you never know who he's going to recruit either.
It's very true. It's very true. You didn't say Southern Miss. I thought you might throw that in there as my curveball or Jackson State. I was prepared for either one of them, but ultimately it's poor Mississippi State, right? They're sort of the stepchild, I feel like sometimes.
Yeah, they can be. They can be. My mom went to Southern Miss, but I am always I grew up going to Jackson State football games. So if you live in Jackson and you're not a Jackson State fan,
Have you become a Colorado Buffaloes fan by sort of proxy now? Or are you bitter about Deion leaving?
I was not one of the ones to become a Colorado fan, I will say, after the coach Sanders left Jackson. Let's just say that maybe I'm in the minority, but in the way in which it was rolled out, I am a Jackson State fan, and I've been a Jackson State fan when we've had coaches like Coach Comagee, the coaches where I don't even want to say their names, but I stay true to the universities that I represent.
I love it. Well, it would have been just as fun to see Shador and Travis Hunter spend 3 years staying in Jackson State. How's that?
Yeah. And we enjoyed them.
Just great to get to know you. Appreciate the time.
Chuck, this is amazing. Thank you, man.